one is no good. Rebounded by Anthony. 2 seconds left. Anthony for the win. Cody rolls it. Cole Anthony gives the Magic a victory.
Close up Magic.
Back to another episode of the Close Up Magic. I'm your host, Stephen Cameron. And as always, I got my right-hand man. Always got 50 grand in the hand. Mr. Malik Grady, what's going on, dude? How you doing?
Not too much. Still weirdly excited to talk about the Magic, even though it's July 25th. We don't get any basketball for months, but still just as fired up as always. I'm a weirdo.
Oh, dude,
so what can I say?
Of course. Yeah, man, of course. I love it. I love it.
I think it's you. I think you're the catalyst that makes me just fired up and excited. You know, just maybe just the look in your eye or what I know is in your heart. You know what I'm saying?
You know,
I don't know what it is.
If only Magic fans knew how I'm laughing a little bit off of our DM conversation early this morning and how we were at each other's throats. Yeah. Oh, man. Well, I'm glad you're doing well. And it's always a pleasure to podcast with you, even when we do have like the most random conversations at 3 a.m, my time, 6 a.m, your time. It's absolutely hilarious how life works sometimes. Well, everyone, welcome back to the show. We just want to say that this show is presented by 19 Media Group, phenomenal network, just going into their second year. Big things are coming to them, so go check them out and all the good podcasts they have going on these days. You can find them in the show notes. The other thing is, big shout out to all the viewers who tuned into our last episode. It was by far our most played episode ever of the history of the show, even bigger than we had past players on with Terrence Ross. Between the YouTube plays, which are just under 1,000 at this point, and all the audio only plays in podcast form, it was a massive success. So I don't know if I hit some algorithm properly with some tagging or whatnot, but either way, I appreciate y'all tuning into that show. But what that means is we only got 106 YouTube subscribers, and there was over 800, 900 plays on that last episode. Y'all better be subscribing. Come on. Just hit that button. Do us a favor. It helps us out in the algorithm, and it doesn't even bother you much except get the show in front of you faster. So I appreciate you if you subscribe. And if you're listening to an audio-only platform, please just give us a review. That'd be great. 5 stars is awesome. Okay, that's all the heavy hitting housekeeping stuff. Malik, we got some news to sort of break. We're sort of news breakers, not really, but kind of. It definitely affects the Magic, and I'm really looking forward to you. This is actually going to be a segment that you're going to talk about later on in the show. So listeners, please tune in. Tweet of the week is back. Tweet of the week. Malik, why don't you kick off tweet of the week? You have a good one.
Well, my tweet of the week, once again, isn't quite Magic related. It's just something that made me chuckle. It is from No Context Brits. And the caption says, if Stranger Things was British, and it has that font. And the words are bit odd in it.
I love it.
It's a visual medium. But
I love it.
Anyway, you
YouTubers.
imagine the guy from the Boys, Butcher saying it, bit odd in it, rather than Stranger Things. So I only watched the first season and a half and stuff, but it's definitely a resonant show. Good stuff and all.
You gotta finish that up. It's a great season. It's a great show. My tweet of the week is actually a fun one. I really like this one because it's actually relevant to the Magic. It's not the news we're talking about later. It's the news we're talking about now. The Magic roster is like 90% complete. We definitely have to like trim it down a little bit because we just signed our last two-way. It's the Shams Charania announcement of our newest member. And so the tweet says, after averaging nearly 16 points for the Timberwolves in Summer League, guard Kevon Harris has agreed to a 2-way NBA contract with the Orlando Magic. Sources tell The Athletic at Stadium. So that's exciting. Our 2-way spots are filled. We have Kevon Harris and Malik. What's the other dude's name?
Admiral Schofield.
Why am I saying? Of course, Admiral Schofield. We had him last year. Yeah, so that's exciting. Kevon Harris is sweet. He's like 6'6", got some athleticism to him.
About 215 or so. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
nice.
We basically only have 2 more openings at the moment to bring the training camp, barring someone being waived or a trade or something like that. 16 guys would be on the main roster plus 2 ways. There's going to be some movement. We know someone's going to have to get, pushed around a little bit and stuff. And it's interesting to see.
I feel like we're on the same point on who might be cut. I don't know. Am I reading your brain where you both feel like Devin Kennedy is the person that is probably not returning to the Magic with his non-guaranteed contract?
Well, I guess I would put it like this. I would put it more in a positive way, which is that he's going to have the opportunity to show what he can bring in training camp. On a non-guaranteed contract, that makes you a little more, obviously a lot more expendable. You have other guys like Caleb Houston just got signed. You have other guys like even Bol, who has been signed on a 2-year deal, who are probably less likely to be moved. But here's the opportunity part of it. If Devin Kennedy comes into camp and he's just unbelievable, he's added a pump fake, he's hitting even more shots than he was before, he's in front of everybody defensively, he's going to make things tough for the Magic. And we've seen other teams in the past think, okay, this guy's probably going to be cut, but end up saying, hey, listen, this guy's so good, we're going to make room for him, we're going to move someone else. That actually happened to Isaiah Hartenstein last year. Yeah. Most people thought he was going to be cut from the Clippers roster. Like, oh, this guy, that guy's not going to make it. But he played so good in training camp and in preseason, the Clippers were like, you know what? We're going to cut this guy and trade this guy and trade that guy because this guy can ball. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I like to be positive. Devin Kennedy is a really interesting young man. There's opportunity for him, just like there's opportunity for RJ Hampton, who we'll talk about later, to step up and earn playing time. I wouldn't necessarily bet on it in some ways, but the opportunity is there. These are, motivated athletes, and I don't ever want to put a ceiling on somebody's potential.
I feel like the way he stays on this team is, one, like you said, he crushes it in training camp and preseason before they have to start cutting people. And I'm just thinking, who are they actually going to cut or trade to force I think he's like 26 shooter on the team and probably at his ceiling, or very close to it. My thought is he someone they force a Terrence Ross trade for? Probably not, no, but maybe that is a possibility.
If there was an opportunity for Terrence Ross to be moved, and if you wanted to package him with RJ Hampton and you got something for that, if something presented itself, again, I don't expect it, but if there's some blockbuster trade that goes on, and for example, all of a sudden Boston or the Nets end up with only 12 guys on the roster, they're like, hey, listen, we're going to bring in Terrence Ross. We know this guy is going to do what he's told, hit shots, be great in the locker room, get some dunks. Hey, Terrence Ross, we'll take you and a flyer on RJ Hampton for this, and this. You can see those things happening.
I'm just thinking a little bit.
See hashtag in the background, but
your cat, yes, I love him. It's his first appearance.
Yeah, I think that's his hashtag's debut. Yeah,
I'm thinking a little bit more simply on this. Like, okay, like we could force T. Ross out on if we could get on a bigger trade, but realistically, this guy crushes it. There's not something out there really available for us to move someone right away. Like, is he good enough to where they're going to start calling the league and saying, who wants Terrence Ross? We need to create an open spot. Probably not going to have that type of impact. They're probably not going to put him over the guy they just drafted and signed it to a 4-year contract in Caleb Houston.
There's no chance.
Maybe, and this is not just hate. Maybe Bol is the person that he could outplay to earn a roster spot. I doubt they're cutting RJ Hampton. He's on a first round pick, rookie scale contract.
Yeah.
They got years in control with that, even though I know some people are not the biggest fan of him. So we'll see. I would like to see him show up and give the front office something to consider, even if he ultimately is not back on the team and either in Lakeland or he'll be a free agent. So technically he could go sign somewhere else, maybe on a 2-way elsewhere. So that'll be interesting.
I like that there's a little more uncertainty. I like that there's a little more, hey, we got to step it up. Somebody's who's coming in here isn't gonna survive. A little bit of bachelorette, who's gonna get the final rose thing going. There's a little bit of iron sharpens iron to that. Whereas in years past, it's been like, hey, everyone here, you're all gonna make it. You're all getting a consolation prize, a participation ribbon. No one's gonna get hurt here. But now it's kind of like, hey, most of you guys are safe, but how safe are you? Because somebody's leaving, somebody that we like. It's not like, like, oh man, no one likes Devin Kennedy. No, they love him. You know what I mean? The guy bled
a lot of people
on
like him.
The Orlando Magic floor and then got back, to be able to play. It's like he has a lot of fans in and outside of the locker room. So it's not like they're looking like, wow, I can't wait to give this his walking papers. So
and, I mean, you also got to consider he was also the league MVP of the G League when the Magic won the G League, and then we brought him up on a 2-way, and then he hurts himself. Right. So I mean, like, the story's great. He's a great person. If you heard him on the Terrence Ross podcast, you can tell he's a super well spoken, like obviously well liked.
He's a future senator or something like that.
Yeah,
bro. You know what I'm saying?
Good dude. He
really is.
His career is not basketball much longer the next couple of years, and that's no disrespect. He's just incredibly smart. The dude went to Princeton and graduated. Like, he's intelligent for sure. Well, I what is exciting to me about this signing, Malik, is it's someone we didn't expect.
Yeah,
I was very much expecting Atomic Akuzi,
a retread.
Yeah, someone that's already in our system or that was on our team. It was nice to see something different. I was totally blown away by this. Like, who is this guy? Oh, he was on the Timberwolves. Oh, I have no idea who he is. He's kind of a baller. This is going to be fun. Let's see what he's got. So I really like that aspect that the Magic are doing something different. And it's a little bit, it's new and fresh, and, a 6'6" guard or wing with size and athleticism, that can get to the rim. Like, this guy's cool. He's fun. I'm excited. So the reason why, if you're watching this, you saw Malik and I both kind of look down in the corner, is our guest internet just went out. So Malik and I are going to pause the podcast for a second, recalibrate, and we're going to continue with the rest of the show. We'll be right back, and please stay tuned for a great episode. All right, everyone. I know in the intro I said our guest had some internet issues and bailed, but guess what? It's fixed. The internet is back, and we actually have our guest, Luke Smith. Welcome back to the show. For the guests who haven't heard of Luke, he was one of the original contributors to the Close-Up Magic as a writer. Still occasionally when we do like group articles and stuff, gets involved there. He's been a podcast guest multiple times over the years. Luke, how you doing, sir? Welcome.
I'm good. Thank you, man. Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me back, man. I'm sorry about the little internet connection issue we had out here in Australia, but we're all good. We're all good.
You can just never tell what's going to happen over in the land down under and what's going to cause the internet issues.
We're very isolated, man. I guess sometimes the wires from the central internet that happens in the world somewhere, everything starts to delay us. But no, we are all good, man. So I appreciate your patience as well as you, Malik.
I do have a confession to make. I have to say I may or may not have messaged Luke Sylvia of the Six Man Show, thinking I was talking to you just because you're Luke with an S. And I was hey, Luke, you're back online. It's good to see you again. I never got any messages back. I see now why, because it's a completely different person and Twitter handle, but I may have done that in the past.
Well, I remember, Malik, a few years ago, I was on Close Up Magic, and I think that you and Stephen were maybe chatting about the episode in the tweets afterwards. And you had thought I was, I think it's Luke. Is it Luke Jaleel, the British guy who lives in
That's
Florida?
The other one too.
Yeah. And I was like, no, that's not it. I'm Australian. He's British, but same.
Luke Jaleel, Luke Sylvia.
We got a lot of Lukes in the Magic community.
It's awesome.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like Luke. It's a good name too. Strong name. So, Luke, we've made a couple of down under jokes already. Apologies, but it kind of connects us to the first thing I wanted to talk about, because you and I talk about it all the time, particularly during the NBL season, about how X player was somehow connected to the Magic or this or that, or maybe there's a player over here in the States on a certain team that has Australian ties. So my question is to you, when you think of the most successful player that has a connection to the Magic in Australia in some form, doesn't have to be an Australian player for us, doesn't have to necessarily be a Magic player that's played in Australia, but like when you think about that, what are some of the names that come to mind for you, just in general, when it's like Magic Australian connection?
Well, the one that I think people wouldn't know or expect is actually Al Harrington, who you guys would remember from playing with the Orlando Magic. He came out and played a year in the NBL in like 2015, like really before I think the visibility of the NBL increased a lot in American eyes, which I think it has now through the Next Stars programs and just some of the different connections that the leagues have. But he was the first guy to come out where it was like, oh, he actually had like an established NBA career and is like coming out at the tail end, rather than a guy who played a handful of games here and there, occasionally would come through the league. So I remember when he came out, I was stoked. He played for a team that I don't have much love for, but it was really cool. And that was the first. I feel like Al Harrington coming out was like the precursor to, I guess, the Next Stars program with like Terrence Ferguson, LaMelo, RJ, and now like a lot of guys with some real experience coming out. That type of stuff's happening in the NBL all the time. But he came, and then after that, like you started to see a bit of a shift in the profile of the Americans coming out, like Steve Blake. Remember Steve Blake, who played for the Lakers for a while? Yeah. He came out. Josh Powell, and then from there you started to get all sorts of different connections in that sense. And also, I guess I'll go the flip side. On the other side in America, the Magic, unfortunately, are one of, and it breaks my heart every day, and Stephen, you've heard me talk about this, there's only 6 teams left in the NBA that have never had an Australian player, and the Magic are actually one of them.
Man.
So it breaks my heart. Like Isaac Humphries was really close. He played a year for Lakeland. Yeah, big 7-footer from Australia. Mm-hmm. He ended up having a little stint with Atlanta. But yeah, he's still only young. Like he's got an opportunity to maybe get back to the NBA. He's still only 24, currently playing out in Australia. Delhi was going to play Summer League for Orlando, I remember, but ended up going to Cleveland. But there's a lot of connections now over here. I think I haven't been able to work out what the connection is. I think that there is someone in the NBL, like or a player agent who has good connections in the NBL right now, that is somehow creating some sort of tie between the Magic and the NBL. Because last year,
I wanted to bring this up. I wanted to bring this up because you talk about it all. You and I will talk about this often, and I'll always kind of like check in, and sometimes I'll even look up game stats. But I don't think a lot of Magic listeners realize how many guys that have somehow played with us to an extent in our Lakeland team have actually gone over and had phenomenal careers, like seasons over in the NBL. I mean, I don't want to say any let me say one. Like, didn't Gerald Martin, wasn't he in the running for like MVP last season?
He just won a championship with Sydney in the NBL. So last year, like you wouldn't believe it. Like I remember sitting there being like, what's the connection here? And Malik, this would surprise you, but the opening rosters for all the NBL last year, there was Jarrell Martin, BJ Johnson, Robert Franks, Josh Majette, Steven Zimmerman, Vic Moore, and someone else, 7, all on NBL rosters. Like there's I
know about Vic Law. I didn't realize the rest of them had done that as well. That's interesting.
And Josh Majette's team actually lost to Jarrell Martin's team in the championship.
Yeah, Malik, the funny thing is most of these guys, a lot of them, like they play very well over in the NBL. Like I think Luke, remind me, like Vic Law did fairly well. Gerald Martin, like was one of the best players in the league. Josh Majette was solid for his teams. Steven Zimmerman, I think, was just kind of like so-so, like nothing too special. But like, BJ Johnson, I think, how did he do? Remind me. I don't remember.
BJ Johnson was so-so as well. I don't think he actually finished out the season. Robert Franks was okay. He just re-signed with a new team. He's coming back. He's coming back to play for Adelaide, the team that Josh Giddey played for before he went over. But yeah, no, like that's cool. There's obviously a connection somewhere along the way. There's an agent right now funneling guys through to the NBL, which is cool. But yeah, I would say Al Harrington's like the most high-profile guy that has a connection with both the Orlando Magic and the NBL. And I would say that the day Orlando finally get an Australian guy, like you guys remember a few years ago, and I think perhaps we were just being used as leverage, but you remember we extended the offer sheet to Joe Ingles when he was a restricted free agent?
I do.
We did, yeah. And I was ready. I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to get all my money out. I'm going to buy every single Joe Ingles jersey that comes out. Like the moment there's an Australian Magic player, I'm going to be over the moon.
So are you saying we should trade for Ben Simmons the next time he becomes available?
If we play him at the power forward exclusively, yeah, I'll do it.
Dude, perfect. Down.
Because he's not a point guard. He's not a point guard.
He could back up Paulo.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Yeah, right now, I'm just hoping the guy gets back on the court, back surgery, and then whatever's going on with his kind of mental and emotional health. It's like, dang, man, it's just, I guess, maybe at one point
his team's
it was amusing here and there, but now it's just like, hey, man, just get right. Just get right and play basketball. You seem to love it, and let's get back to it, man. So that's all
it, man. Like I obviously will back him forever, man. Like I'm currently sitting in a lounge room in Melbourne, Australia, where he's from. And I think maybe what American audiences might not realize, and I guess it's something that a lot of American kids are used to, but because he was so highly touted in Australia from such a young age, like he has had pressure on him, even over this side, from like an insanely young age, like 15 years old, Australian basketball fans knew about him. And yeah, for me, it's just like, I just hope he comes good and I'll kind of support him, till the end, really.
Well, we do have a player that is not Australian, but who went and played a season in the NBL, RJ Hampton. He skipped college, didn't want to go that route, even though he had offers at, some very high schools. He was one of the top recruits for that class, and he decided to go overseas. When he was over in Australia, what was, now I believe you were living in Toronto at this time, but obviously still had major roots and ties to the NBL. What was your opinion of just like, and that was kind of like the first year we had some bigger names too. LaMelo Ball was also over there. What did it feel like for that league to kind of have this integration happen through the Stars program? The Next Stars program.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Like the Next Stars program, they were kind of the first two who did it under that name. But if you remember, I think he unfortunately might be kind of semi out of the league now, but Terrence Ferguson was the first guy.
I was following OKC very closely back then. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. He was the first guy to kind of be quite highly touted as a high school prospect who skipped college. And he came out also with a guy called Brian Bowen, who kind of couldn't continue with college stuff because of some payment issues that seemed to have arisen.
Table stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So they kind of kickstarted that idea that the NBL was like, oh, what have we got in the mix for these like top tier high school guys? But RJ and LaMelo really changed the game with like the profile of it, obviously, both being like top 5 and LaMelo just being, an entity unto himself when it comes to fame already. You guys understand what I mean? So I was away, so I never actually got to see him play. I was living in Toronto, but it was really cool. I became quite fond of RJ, and I don't know if you remember, Stephen, but he was actually my pick that I wanted at 15 that year. Like I had high hopes about, regardless of how raw he was, I saw in him an athleticism and perhaps a little bit of a, just a simple beat a guy off a dribble, maybe some foundation to create some sort of shot for himself as he develops over time that we hadn't had in a while.
Yeah.
I've probably had that tempered a little since, but I still think he is like, he's a good kid deep down. Like he seems to have a really good family. His little brother became like a little bit of a celebrity unto himself in Australia, because the family was all there with him in New Zealand, in Auckland. He struggled a little bit. I would say the difference between him and LaMelo's team stunk. And he was just given the ball and they were just like, yo, just sell tickets, dude. Like that's what it was with him. But RJ's team was actually, in the playoff race.
Competing.
Yeah, and he at the end of the day, it's like, all right, cool, you're a great American high school player right now, but American high school still isn't the Australian Professional League. It's still, the Australian Professional League is still better. And he was coming out and you could just see that they weren't as good with him on the court. Like I remember the on-off numbers were just like, whenever RJ played extended minutes, the team was quite bad. Right. But he really started to get the hang of it as time went on. There was some whispers his camp and family didn't love it in the back end, but, he seems appreciative of it. I wonder, I'm curious as to what you guys think about his decision to actually play Summer League, because I liked it. It was a bit rough to watch, but I liked the reasoning behind why he did it. And he actually got interviewed by, there's an Australian NBL guy who goes out, like a few of the NBL media guys will go out there every year to Summer League because obviously a lot of Summer League players will end up signing in the NBL.
Sure.
And this year, speaking of Australian Magic connections, this year there was the most NBL-related players in Summer League ever. There was like 20 guys who had played in the league or were Australian playing in the league in Summer League.
Outside of you mean outside of Dyson Daniels, or you mean
so there was like, outside of Josh Giddey, Dyson Daniels, there was Jack White, Robert Franks, Dejan Vasiljevic, all these guys.
Gotcha.
A young kid called Jack White just signed a 2-way with Denver, which is really cool.
I saw that.
Yeah. So he's actually from the same town I was born in. We were both born in a small town called Traralgon. But Liam Santamaria from the NBL media, he interviewed RJ, and just the way RJ was like, it was a very mature reasoning that he had, I think.
Mm-hmm.
For how bad it went and how bad it looked, I actually felt bad for him, but his reason as to why he wanted to do it, I can't commend enough. So I know Magic fans have mixed reasons and about as to why they think he should have or shouldn't have, but I'm into the fact he did it. I do wish it went better for him,
I agree there. Malik, I'll keep this short and then I'll let you go. But ultimately when a player in their third year, decides to go participate in any extent, we can circle this back to even Mo Bamba volunteering last year to go do practices, right? He wasn't volunteering to play, but he wanted to go do the practices and be involved. It's always coming from a good place, right? Ultimately, and I'll even kind of get a little bit more detailed too, right? Like, I think we all know that RJ's role is not on ball, but he played on ball in Summer League, in my opinion, to work on when the ball is in his hands, making a decision. Not that the Magic have any intention of using him as a point guard, but like, hey, you're playing next to Suggs and Cole or Harris or whatever, and the ball's going to eventually touch your hands. What are you going to do to make a good decision with it in your hands? And that's why I think they ran him on the ball so much. Did it work out well? No, he kind of didn't have a great showing, which kind of sucks. Kind of like, might even put a little bit of a hot seat on him going into this year and this season. But, ultimately I agree with you, Luke. I think it was a good thing. He had good intentions on why he wanted to go. It just didn't kind of pan out. Malik, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just piggybacking on that, I think these first 2 years for RJ in the league with the Magic and also in Summer League, they've given a lot of on-ball reps because that's the best way for a player to develop, to learn the right decisions to make, to see the defense, whether you're going to be a point guard or not, whether you're going to be a primary playmaker or not, to get those reps to see what you can be and have that blossom into something. Now for RJ, when he hasn't been next to a great point guard, which same as Cole Anthony, there haven't really been great point guards on the Magic during their tenure here. Same thing happened on that Summer League team. It was basically like sink or swim. You got, the skyhook guy next to you. You got Tommy Kusi by you, but you're really going to be having the ball in your hand. So you really have a chance to kind of fall on your face a little bit in that kind of thing. Ideally, you'd like a guy to shine a little more in those situations, and he wasn't quite able to do that. I'm hoping that, he's still, whatever he takes when he has the actual role, kind of shows out better in the fall. It's interesting. Like, I think RJ, to me, reminds me a lot of Mo Bamba in some ways, in that their interviews are always really interesting. They're such intelligent young men and just good guys and stuff that people like. On the court, you don't necessarily see that same hoops quotient, so to speak. You don't see that feel for the game on both ends. But off the court, they know what the problems are. They know what some of their issues are. They aren't necessarily able to translate it yet. So it's kind of interesting watching that. I remember watching RJ before he went over to Australia. His reasoning and on national TV, he just sounded so sharp. He was like, hey, I want to play against bigger guys than me. I want to, them to kind of kick my butt and, play against better players and also get compensated for it in a way that I'm not going to be compensated in the US and stuff. And it's like, wait, this guy is 18. I mean, like when I was 18, I was peeing on my fingers, what I'm saying? Like, what are we talking about here? So it was just impressive to see that. And then it felt like they kind of had a certain way they thought it would go over in Australia, that the team would use them, and it wasn't quite used in that way. You've heard a couple of kind of behind the, like, read between the lines things he said. He's never said anything publicly like, oh, these teams screwed me, but it's like, hey, it wasn't quite what we expected, but hey, I'm a man, I'm going to do this and that and the other. So it's just, I root for him. I'm not sure if it's going to work out the way it hopes with us, but I do see maybe in a couple of years, maybe with another team, him kind of, doing some of those things. And that kind of thing is what kind of comes to mind for me for RJ.
To your point, Malik, I like what you said about the idea of putting him in on-ball reps because it's going to help decision making. But also, if I bring this back to, because Stephen, as you know, like I coach high school basketball and I have for a few years, like not at a super high level or anything. Like I think in Toronto, I coached a slightly higher level. But one thing I have always thought is putting the actual ball in a young player's hands and allowing them to just try and like navigate a pick and roll and
make mistakes.
What happens is when they get there, they're 2 feet in the paint. Are they going to make a mistake about not looking to the weak side when there's like an off-ball screen or hitting a shooter? When you can force them to do that 100, 150 times over and over, when they don't have the ball, they're going to start to do the things they want their teammates to do. You know what I mean? Like he's going to be quicker at attacking closeouts if he gets the ball off a guy kicking out of a pick and roll. He's going to move off ball better and stuff like that. If in lower stakes basketball, he's kind of given the ball to kind of be that guy who needs to see what's happening on the court. And so I actually don't mind that at Summer League, they were just like, all right, man, you're the man. Like you just figure it out. And like, it was hard because at the end of the day, we did all want to watch Paolo and see him do his thing. Yeah. But, like it's going to be an interesting year for RJ. If you were forcing me to make a bet on whether or not he's on the team in the next couple of years, I probably would bet that he's not. But, it is what it is, and he's a good kid, and I'm glad we gave him an opportunity if it does end up he succeeds somewhere else.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like there was just an interesting article in the Orlando Sentinel by our former guest, Kobe Price, beat writer for the Orlando Magic. It was a part 3.
How good is Kobe?
He's awesome.
He's really good.
He's great.
Young guy, and I like some of the ways that he kind of reaches out to other young Black writers, trying to mentor them as well. That's something you don't necessarily see kind of behind the scenes stuff, but he's a really good guy and all. But he was part of writing this kind of 5-part series about NIL. And in that story, RJ Hampton was the cover guy. And as you mentioned, talking about the Next Stars program and how that changed and kind of fed into NIL. Now, real quick, Luke, is the Next Stars program still going? Is it just on a lower level, or is it like how is, because you don't hear about that as much. I guess they can't afford to compete with overtime in G League Elite, I'm assuming. Is that what's going on? Yeah.
So look, the NBA knew what the Next Star, like they knew they had to respond to that. Like it was probably in regards to a foreign league, it was probably one of the biggest kind of competitor type things in a way. Like I think the NBA, the NCAA knew that like, oh, this is something where we could genuinely lose high profile kids coming out of high school. And they had to start responding to it. So you saw the G League Ignite start. Look, the thing with payment to college athletes, I don't think we were that far away from it anyway. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like I think we were just genuinely as a society and as these young kids were coming up being taught more about, like their value and how they actually positively affect just the bottom line of these schools. Like we were going to eventually see a shift, but I think this did speed it up a little because of the profile of the guys that were starting to come out. And even some of the guys who have considered it, like I'm pretty sure Paolo, when he said his last 5 places, I think he had the NBL maybe.
Interesting.
Or someone from that class, someone quite high up in that class. But
I wouldn't be surprised, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a funny little thing. Like there's something a few of us in Australia have noticed is if for years there when an Australian guy got drafted, like Terrence Ferguson or someone, Adam Silver at the draft would always say from so-and-so in the NBL. He doesn't mention the NBL anymore.
Oh, that's interesting.
He stopped saying it on stage like a couple of years ago.
Interesting.
Not acknowledging it. So, so I think that it made the NBA kind of consider like, all right, what roadblocks have we put in regards to retaining the best US talent, high school talent, and keeping them, in America? At the end of the day, they're all going to end up back there no matter what path they take because it's the elite league in the world. But It's certainly, I think, a consideration that they've had to make. It is still going, Malik, but it's now more so drawing like some European talent, like Ousmane Dieng, Hugo Besson with 2 kids.
Okay.
Yeah, they just came out. Both played for the New Zealand Breakers, the team that RJ played for, and both just got drafted. Usman Dieng, obviously quite high. And now that I'm back living at home, I was able to see them play. So it's cool. Like, it's a cool thing to be like, here's this kid who's obviously going to make the NBA. He's playing in my town tonight in Australia. I'm going to go watch him. There's another kid next year's draft, something Rays, Rayan, Rayn. He's like pegged top 20 in a few drafts next year.
Okay.
He's actually coming out to play next year as well. But it's more so going towards like French and Spanish talent at the moment.
Interesting. It's cool to see the NBL become such a strong league in recent years to even get these types of players in the first place, right? I think you can debate that the NBL is top 3, top 4-ish league in the world. You know, it's very strong. And that ball is tough.
Depends on the year, I would say sometimes. But
yeah. Someone summarized it really well perfectly recently. There was an ex-media guy out here, this guy Olgun Aluk. He's now actually Josh Giddey's agent or manager. So he's now living in America as Josh's manager. But he said the NBL isn't the second best league in the world by way of on-court quality. Like, that's still Spain. That's still like the Spanish league. You know, that's still the Euro League when they have the Champions League going.
The French league, Turkey.
But he was like, it's the second best league when it comes right now to probably markability and like just general awareness.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Like, it has the most kind of like symbiosis with the NBA. You've got guys now coming to Australia because they know that it's a legitimate pathway. Like Jay Sean Tate, he took less money, came out, played here. Jack White after college could have gone to Europe, but he came back. You know, he knew it was his way over. Thon Maker, who I think is someone who probably needs to have a good year to get his career back on track because he's had a lot of like injuries and stuff not go his way. Like, he just played the Asia Cup for Australia, had an unreal campaign. Like, he was on the tournament All-Star 5. Like, in my head, it's like, just play a year at home, man. Like, everyone's watching. You get to start. You're going to play 30 minutes a night. Like, if you want to get your NBA dream back up and running, like, it's probably a pretty good place to do it, you know?
That's exciting. Yeah. I mean, I haven't tuned into a game. I don't think I watched a game this last year. To be honest, I did check some standings, but the season before, you and I watched a couple of games together, and it's a tough league. It's fun. It's different style of basketball than what's played in the NBA. And, there's some ballers in that league that, could come play in the NBA that probably don't. It's really interesting. Yeah. Let's transition here for a second. So we were originally going to pitch and set up this next segment a little bit differently. But like I had said in the introduction segment, that we have some news. Are we breaking news? Maybe. Call us all Woj and Shams and Mark Stein. We could be newsbreakers for the Magic right now. Maybe not. Maybe this is kind of like, this could also kind of fit in the "Is This Anything" segment with David Steele. But Malik, you're the one that did all the homework. You found this information, and it's quite interesting. I'm gonna let you go ahead and talk about our bombs that we're dropping here.
Well, what's interesting is what we're kind of referring to is the guy who's been involved in strength and conditioning for the Magic, a gentleman named Nathan Spencer, was with I think it's the Illawarra Hawks. Does that sound right? Am I saying it right?
You're saying it perfect. Actually, I'm really impressed that someone from America could pull off Illawarra the first time. That's great.
I was a big Elle Macpherson fan back in the day. So
there you go.
But he came over and was part of the staff with Weltman and them in June of 2018, back when they brought over a bunch of guys after they fired Vogel and his staff. They fired a bunch of the strength guys at that point and brought him over from Australia. Long story short, I was making this list trying to figure out who got moved where, when he got elevated to this time, that kind of thing. I was using it as much as I could: Instagram, Google, LinkedIn, actually quite a bit. Trying to get some information, and I actually found that Nathan Spencer actually is no longer the strength and conditioning coach for the Orlando Magic. As of a week ago, the Magic have a brand new head strength and conditioning coach by the name of Todor Pandov.
There it is.
That's when I should have hit it. I apologize. I was premature.
But it's just wild, like to have news broken on LinkedIn of all places, and have it have happened a week ago. And the reason, part of the reason I know that it's legit, that it's not just, oh, I'm putting it on there as that I got a new job. Him accepting the job with the Magic is liked by none other than Lindsay Winninger, who is the high performance head for the Orlando Magic. She liked his post of saying, I'm excited to share that I've started a new position as head strength and conditioning coach for the Orlando Magic. So LinkedIn apparently is the place to go looking for news. And to know a little bit about this guy, he's a 6'9" Bulgarian who actually played college basketball at Western Kentucky, professionally in the Netherlands, intern with Texas, grad assistant with Miami, strength coach for Miami, strength coach for Western Kentucky, Missouri, Tulsa, before ending up in 2015 with the Sixers as their associate head of strength and conditioning, was kept on when Doc Rivers became coach and kind of elevated to more of an assistant coach and performance director with them. He's been with them, for the last 7 years, and now to the Magic, kind of a more traditional NBA strength coach on board. The Magic have not released any public statements. If you search for his name on Twitter, you will not see strength coach for the Magic. So as far as my understanding, we're breaking this right here when we post this to, with the podcast. So it's pretty exciting for me to kind of do that and see where the direction of the team is going.
Well, Malik, you did some investigation, and it comes out that your investigation is something that was new and does affect the team. So, like, in short, like for the listeners, that I'll compress what you just said. The Magic have a brand new strength and conditioning coach that was not announced, or that we didn't know was going to be a change at head. And
it happened a week ago.
And yeah, it happened a week ago. And the reason why this is like sort of big in a sense is that whole kind of strength conditioning, rehabilitation, performance directors, that whole scene with the Orlando Magic since Weltman and John Hammond have taken over has had a lot of turnover in the last couple of years. And so, Malik, I know eventually we're going to be, I'm going to pass this back to you, but before that, like, Luke, when it comes to news like this and just knowing the history that we've had in the last 5 years with this 4 or 5 years with this front office, what are some of the first thoughts that come into your head when we have another new strength and conditioning coach?
A part of me has this there's just this apprehension about like, well, what's happening? Because we are a team that we all have had to sit there and talk about like what is happening with Jonathan Isaac. We know that our team just keeps things under wraps. So I understand, like, from an employment perspective, they may just do the same thing as well and not make a big deal about it. But we have had a pretty divided fan base when it comes to, Orlando should be more transparent with, injuries and recoveries and rehab and all of that stuff. And then the rest of the fan base are kind of just of the opinion, like, it's fine, we trust them, let them do their thing. But I feel like when I hear that there's been a change like that, like, I have to wonder, like, well, what's the why behind that? How good is this guy? Like, what is going to be the effect of having this person and their experience in, considering we're still going into a season not knowing if Jonathan Isaac's back? We still wonder, like, we've also, every year we look at Mohamed Bamba and we're like, he looks bigger, he looks bigger, but there still is frame issues there, I think, a little bit. And issues, strength issues, 100% strength, stamina. But I'm also curious because we literally have just selected a number one pick. You know what I mean? Like, we now
gotta get it right.
Got to get it right. And, like, I'm always a bit weary about the concept of, like, referring to humans, young men, as assets. You know what I mean? But we now have this thing where, like, this kid, and it's like, we've got to, part of me, I remember having this thought the other day to myself, was like, what if, though, we just never actually played him and we just were like, always like, cool, we got this number one pick. And you're just like, sorry, dude, you can't play, so you don't get hurt. Like, it's so tricky. And, like, I'm sitting there thinking, like, all right, now we got this kid and he's going to kill it and he's going to be great. But I just hope that he's looked after and the team manages it well, because I know it's not necessarily something that's strength and condition based, but he had the sweat thing, the thing they were talking about in college, where he was having the excessive sweat throughout games and he was losing weight. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I trust. I do like our front office. I'm actually quite positive about them if I was to look back over our time having them lead the team. There's a couple of things I don't love, but with this, right around the time we have a number one pick, I'm like, we have to get this right. We have to get this right. This needs to be the right guy.
Malik, let me say one thing, and then I'm going to let you riff because I know you have a lot of thoughts here. But this is sort of piggybacking. So when I think of this news, and you and I were talking about this last night, Malik, is my brain goes to why the turnover, right? And why are we having so much turnover? It's not necessarily going directly to the players. That's not where it went to at first. And it eventually got there through conversation with you, Malik. But eventually I'm like, is there something internally that is happening? Are we not hiring the right people? Are the people just not interested in staying long enough and they're wanting to find other opportunity that matches more their lifestyle or I don't know, maybe their wife moved and that's why they wanted to, that's why they moved with it, right? There's so many variables. Then the other thing that comes to mind is when it starts getting back to the players and how it affects them is, what are the job descriptions? Who have the power to make what decisions? Yeah. Who have the power to make what decisions on players' plans to recovery and their programs to, even if they're not recovering, like their programs to like Mobamba gain strength and get there, right? So who are the decision makers? And that all that is like really unknown. And so I have a lot of questions about that. I know it all affects the players to a different degree, but that's just sort of where my head's at. Malik, I just wanted to say that, and I'm going to pass this off to you to give your thoughts on the whole situation, because you did a lot of work. I imagine you have a lot of thoughts on this.
Well, and the thing is that when we first talked about it, we were going back and forth. Some of my hackles were raised at some of the questions you asked, but the more I thought about it, all those questions are legitimate. All those questions make sense. All those questions, I'd like to have those answers too. And part of the issue is that, are we going to get those answers? Who do we ask for the answers? Are they going to come in a press release? There's some of these people that are in the training department that have never done interviews. There are people that have come and gone from the Magic from 2018 that were not heard from. I might have like some guys I tagged in a tweet here and there, and I maybe got a like or something here and there, but there was very little interaction in social media, that kind of thing. So it's just interesting to see where they're coming from. And the thing is that I came into I usually come from an optimistic point of view. I'm always scheming, how's this going to work? How's this going to mean that we game the system? So back in 2018, when the Magic hired a head of high performance, that a position that they made from the Seattle Sounders in MLS, when they hired a strength and conditioning coach from P3, my mind instantly went to, they're outside the box. They're ahead of the game.
Right.
MLS is doing revolutionary work with their wearable technology and some of the things that they're doing. This guy's going to bring that in here. We're going to be ahead of the game. And P3, I had seen some of the things that they had done with Luka. I see some of the things that they've done with other players in terms of acceleration and thinking outside the box, just training guys for the draft. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's going to come in, going to revolutionize what we do with strength and conditioning. And first of all, I don't think that necessarily materialized, but also I don't think they didn't capitalize on being able to kind of sell that. If they had gotten in front of a microphone and said, hey, listen, here's what we're going to do. I came from P3. You don't know what it's like. I had Luka. I had so-and-so. And all of a sudden they could sell it. And you're like, oh my gosh, this guy really knows what he's talking about. Well, the same thing with the guy from the Sounders. He's like, when we play soccer, they play 90 minutes at a time. You can't sub. You can't, if a guy has a red card, he gets off the field, you got to have stamina. We're going to bring that to the Magic. This is what you're going to see. We'd have been excited, but instead they had complete and radio silence. And when they left completely quietly. I had to look up. I was looking up other things back then in like 2020 and that kind of thing to find out that Luke Story had taken a job during the season with UC Santa Barbara. True story, during the season. After the next season, David Tenney left and went back to MLS and stuff. And again, in and of itself, it's not necessarily the worst thing. It's not necessarily there's a bad thing going on, but it's all weird to have it be quiet. And then later on you announce, oh yeah, we got a new hire. Oh, ho hum, no big deal. And you're like, wait, is that how it happens at other places and all? So, and in this case, once again, you have Nathan Spencer leaving to become strength and conditioning coach at the NSW Sports Institute in Sydney. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you or not, but he left and he was named their coach in July of this year. No one knew about it.
I'm gonna jump real quick.
He left in May.
That's the connection right there. That's the Australian. That's another Australian connection right there. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry. So
anyway, what can you tell me about the NSW Institute? Like, is that considered a higher position than running the Orlando Magic?
Maybe he just wanted to be close to family, man, because I don't know. I think the NBA is obviously
what level is that? What is that? What is NSW?
So basically what that is like you've got above everybody, you've got the Australian Institute of Sport, which has like got a lot of like your standard like singular Olympic sports and stuff, basketball and stuff like that. But it's where like athletes are trained, where the main studies for Australian sports science and sports nutrition, and all that type of stuff is taught. And then each state will have its own institute. So what he's at there is he's at New South Wales, which is a state where Sydney is. He's at their sports institute, which would be basically like government funded by the New South Wales state government, for them to work on sports science studies. So
just one state he's running? Like not even the whole country necessarily?
That's just one state, dude. That's just one state. Okay. You got to, like, the one thing that I can consider when I hear about stuff like that is over the years since COVID has come in, when I hear of people just moving home for like jobs that aren't as good, it's just like probably being home was a big part of it. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
There was so much quarantine with Australia. I know different people even now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Sam Bassini podcast and works from there. Yep. And he and his wife had to just be like chilling in the hotel for X amount of time before they could come out and everything. So I definitely understand it's a difference.
I could do the same thing. I think Stephen, didn't we do an episode whilst I was
in? We did a podcast. We even watched an NBL game. Yeah.
Yeah, while I was in my hotel quarantine.
While you were in quarantine. Yeah, it was fun.
Sam Bassini from The Athletic, he obviously, as you know, Malik, he lives out here now in Melbourne where I live. I'm going to go. My plan is when I run into him in an NBL game, I'm going to say what's up and tell him I enjoy his writing.
I think it's a little much that you guys...
It's your responsibility to get him on the show next, okay? Luke, it's riding on your hands.
The fact that all of you guys in those 2 weeks, you have to be shaved, you have to do a full body cleanse. I think that's overboard, frankly. That's not how I was raised. I don't know. So,
really traumatizing.
I think this whole thing is just interesting in general because, like, I think in itself, a singular move is not that big of a deal. But when you look at it as a collection and so much, and then like, okay, we can get really conspiracy here and like start adding it to like, holy shit, the Magic have had loads of injuries during our last couple of years too. Is there a connection there, right? Has someone come in and changed a plan that was working or was the original plan not working?
Who's making the plans?
We don't know. And all that goes back into like the job description. It's a little bit like, it's definitely gray. We're probably not going to be able to break it down. I would never want to point a finger at, hey, this guy got an injury, because there was inconsistency of that when, Malik and you and I, and Luke too, I imagine like we know it's a collective agreement, right? And so one person coming in and going is probably not changing something that a group of people built, in my opinion, like at least to a huge degree that maybe, I don't know, maybe there is, I have no idea. I tend to think our front office is hiring good people as well. Like you said, Malik. But I also know that as much as we believe in the Magic's culture and the culture is good, that culture can vary from department to department with larger corporations, right? Just because the players all vibe and the coaches vibe with the players and the coaches vibe with the front office doesn't mean the medical and training staff have same energy. Like my company, for example, has phenomenal culture up and down, outside looking in and inside looking in. But I also know not everyone in every department feels that same way. I've worked in a couple different departments, two different departments in it. I felt very different in my old department to my new department. Even my new department, I look at things from a different glass. So maybe there's something there, maybe not. Maybe I like conspiracy theories too, like Terrence Ross.
I think you're entirely right there, and that like you've got to remember that an NBA organization is a huge corporation, and your coaching staff obviously works really close with your strength and conditioning team and all of your doctors and stuff like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean they interact much with like the PR team or the game day operations and stuff like that. So because you hear about Orlando having a good culture, that might just be that our game day operations team and our PR team who help the players connect to the community is all really good and stuff. But we don't know that doesn't mean that the coaches are disagreeing with the strength and conditioning teams and the doctors, and there might be tension on that side. You know what I mean? Like they are large, multifaceted corporations that you need to consider when you hear about culture. And I sometimes take that stuff with a bit of a grain of salt. You know what I mean? Like, totally. Except for like maybe the San Antonio Spurs, which seem like, like truly transcendent with that stuff. But yeah, no, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. And I think the big thing is like, and then Malik, I'll pass it back to you, is there's so many unknown variables to this, and it's hard to, Malik, I kept asking you, what's your thought? What's your story? What's your angle? Or not? And those were all bad words. And really what I meant is, what is your interest in this? Like what outside of just the change in itself? And it's just hard. And this is where we were not disagreeing, but just having a little bit of differences is like, there's just so much unknown on how an individual impacts a team from a job description. All we know is a title. Titles are kind of meaningless in the corporate world and to an extent, right? For anyone that's had a corporate title, you kind of know like, well, I do a ton of things that absolutely have nothing to do with my
hierarchy.
And or you're responding to someone else. Even if you have this title, someone else ultimately is the decision maker, or you only have the power to make decisions on certain aspects within that, even if you have like a director role over your name. So it's just like, I don't know. That's my thought. Malik, back to you. Sorry, I didn't want to hijack this.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I'm excited about this new hire.
Yeah, he's got a relationship with Holtz already, which is really cool to me. That's one thing I thought about immediately with his time in Philadelphia.
2015.
Apologize. Yeah. Continue.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I didn't think about it and everything like that. So, but he does have a nice resume. I like that he's with the Sixers. I like the working with the different colleges, that kind of thing. So I'm gonna convince myself of how it could work and is going to work. Yeah. But what I try to do, and one of the reasons why I kind of ease back when talking about the reasoning or the interest or the angle was because I aspire to want to put down everything that happens, the timeline, the wins, the wheres of the injuries and the hires, that kind of thing, and then be able to let the facts kind of go where they will, and you be able to make your own decision type of a thing. I do look at certain years where there was a lot of turnover and there were certain major injuries. I don't want to say these are the reasons, but it's important to note that at this time, there were these things going on, and you had these longer rehabs. You had what seemed to me to be change in messages and change in tact. Like you said, you were going to go slow on a guy. It seemed like then later on they sped things up. I actually don't mind that they were so slow with Jonathan Isaac and all that kind of thing, if it turns out right. Like if Jonathan Isaac this fall is fine, in retrospect, it will change how I feel about him setting out this past year. If he's great this year, I'm like, hey, look, did the right thing. The end justify the means in some ways.
But it doesn't stop the question of this summer, like Jonathan Isaac just had a surgery on his hamstring, right? Is that because the past performance that had strength didn't go as planned with him, and this is why we have a new person? We don't know, because ultimately I think there would have been something in the press if it was a firing and not so much a hey, I'm leaving. So I ultimately don't think it's that, but it's definitely where my head goes. Malik, I smell a deep dive article coming your way.
Yeah, I do want to
real soon, because
all the stuff
it's
that I
so
wrote,
detailed. What people don't even understand behind the scenes is we have this outline of the show, which is so detailed with so many dates, a couple of injuries connected to some dates, which I think will definitely get expanded upon it in an article format. But it's just like, dude, it's really interesting how much change has actually happened.
Yeah, I felt bad putting all that in the outline, and then I imagine Luke seeing it and being like, wait, is this dude gonna read this whole thing on the podcast? I wanted to be like really quick. No. I just wrote it out because I want to see it. I'm not just gonna read it. You know what I'm saying? I will put there'll be some tweets and maybe an article and stuff. So again, it's interesting stuff to me. It's freaking July. I'm making new rosters. I'm making new depth charts with Kevon Harris, that kind of thing. So don't worry. For the nerds out there, you'll be able to read what we research and that kind of thing. So I'm in full off-season depth chart mode as well. Like I've got notes from I've got Melbourne United's depth chart for the upcoming NBL season. I've got what I think Orlando's will be. I've got what I think the Boomers will be in next year's World Cup. Like I'm in full depth chart off-season mode too.
Dude, I love it. Man. I love it.
On that note, I'm just going into the season under the impression that Chuma Okeke is the backup power forward. That's all I'm doing right now.
Me too.
Any other changes will be a surprise.
Yeah.
And he'll just shift to small forward if and when Jonathan Isaac is 100%. That's all that'll happen. You know what I mean? Yeah. And we'll be good to go.
Yeah.
So I wonder. Look, in terms of you kind of seemed to me had a little bit of a interesting relationship with Magic social media, where sometimes you're diving in, sometimes you're like, listen, I got to take a break. This is maybe toxic or too much. Where are you now? Paolo Banchero's been drafted. Franz Wagner's coming up. Are you just like, okay, I'm sucking it all in. I'm back, baby. Or are you still kind of like at arm's reach? Or where are you at, man?
Oh, never at arm's reach with the team and team's content. I'm obviously Stephen, I'm talking to Stephen and Jonathan daily, almost I'm always locked into the team.
Yes, okay.
I just had to take a bit of a break from engaging with Magic Twitter, So now I just if you look at my Twitter profile, I actually haven't got a single tweet, but I'll respond to stuff. And I'm obviously in the Close Up Magic group chat. But I read everything so that's just what it is. It's just I'm not going to get in on the conversations too much. But I listen to you guys with every episode. I've jumped back into listening to the 6-Man show. I listen to Game Theory with Sam Vecini a lot. I'm loving how much Magic talk there is on stuff lately.
Yes,
I'm loving
so good.
Back. So relevant.
Loving that Kevin Clark is getting around doing the rounds and all of that. I think it's great. Last year for me, Franz and Wendell's years just was so exciting to me. And I left last season, 22 wins. I didn't care. I was that feels like something that year. I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, but it still felt like something. So this year, I'm so ready for just hopefully, because the thing is with our injury luck, it seems to go in 2-year cycles. Where if you look back to I think 2014, every second year we just get derailed.
Okay.
And I'm just waiting for another year of health. I think Paolo's going to be great. By draft day, I was literally at a point where I was any one of these 3 guys, I'm good because they all have pros and cons.
Yeah.
But I think when we took Paolo, I was really easily able to talk myself into it because just a guy at the end of a shot clock, just be give him a rock and be go, dude, do something, make something happen.
Superstar status.
We haven't had that, and I really love that. But not only have we just gotten that guy, say Houston getting Jalen Green, we haven't just gotten that guy. We have 2 really young guys who are going to be elite second and third best player types, which is Franz and Wendell. Yeah. They are the quintessential, that's the 4th best guy on a championship team.
Versatile, two-way. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was listening to, I think, the Athletic Daily Ding the other day, and maybe it was, is it Andrew Select, who is an OKC writer?
Yeah.
And I think it might have been him, and he was actually really talking the Magic up. He's if you look at this tier of teams who are in rebuilding, but all recently got a high pick, Detroit, us, OKC, and I think Houston.
Was it Detroit or yeah?
Yeah. So if you look at Cade, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Green, and Paolo, right? Let's say you put him in a similar tier developmentally at the moment. He's now look at everybody's second or third best players. And I think that Franz and Wendell are the best 2-3 out of the 4 teams. And that to me is really encouraging. And I don't think I've been the most excited I've been since the post-Dwight years was probably that game 1 win against the Raptors because I was there.
Yes.
And it was one of the best experiences of my life being at that game as someone who's grown up going for the Magic on the other side of the world.
That's awesome.
To like actually be at that game and whilst I was living in the city was unreal. But this is the most I've been able to go into a season and be like, look, we might only walk away with like 30, 35 wins, but we're really building something. And I think I can say that more genuinely than I've been able to say in a long time. And I'm really excited by it.
And there's no chance of getting you over. Like if the Magic in March are going to the playoffs, is there like a piggy bank that Luke is breaking open? Like, all right, baby, I'm coming.
There's a couple of banks who might give me a loan, I think. But like,
Luke, if you're making that trip, I'm making that trip. All right.
Yeah. If the Magic ever got back into championship contention, like for me, it would be, something I'd pretty strongly consider. Like, I think my timeline, Stephen, but end of high school, I drifted away from basketball a little bit, even though I played it all through school and really loved it a lot as a kid. But 2008 was the year I kind of got back in, based on the Celtics playing the Lakers. I saw like a lead up video and I was like, oh, that's like the old days. I'm going to watch again. And then the 2008 Olympics really hooked me back in, and I was like, oh, I wonder how the Magic are doing, like the team I go for. And they were really good and went to the championship the very next year. But I would say, even though we went to the championship that year, I was still kind of relearning the NBA a bit. So I don't think I was as invested as I would be if they made it back this time around now. Right. So if we were a legitimate championship contention team at the start of a season, I probably would be like trying to think about how I could get over. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm excited. I'm so gassed for this year.
It's definitely one of the more exciting times in the last handful of years. Like it was great that first Steve Clifford year when we went to the playoffs, got that first win, Jonathan Isaac was healthy. I think a lot of us think that, they were on track to do a bigger trade if Jonathan Isaac had stayed healthy with Vooch making another all-star team, there was some progress there. But this rebuild out of the last 10 years, 11 years really does, like where we're at today, the last 2 years that we've gone through, feels different. Like we finally have the number one pick. This number one pick looks like a two-way stud that can create for others. Like, the second way needs a little bit of work on the defensive end, but it doesn't look like he's going to be a negative there. We got a lot of young players and picks to go with this team. And it's just an exciting time to be a basketball fan for the Orlando Magic. And, I've never really cared how much the national media talks about us, but I'm not going to lie. It is nice when I turn on a Ringer podcast or the Low Post and oh my God, there's an Orlando Magic stuff. Cause I listen to that stuff anyways, not for Magic content, but it's great when it is Magic content. And I'm like, cool. You guys obviously don't watch our games, but I don't really care because you're talking about us anyways. And it's great.
It is good when it just happens. Like I've, and I think you two would be the same. Like I've very firmly accepted that whilst we are where we are right now, we're not going to hear us talked about. Totally. Or if there's a lot of those national podcast guys where like they go to talk about the Magic, and I'm like, oh man, I can tell you actually like you're talking about 4 years ago storylines. Yeah. When they're like, oh, when was the last time the Magic picked a guy who wasn't a long 7-footer? And it's like, well, the last few drafts, like they're actually like their timeline of storylines they know and can narrate are a little bit behind, but just having the Paolo excitement makes it good. And he's going to be fine defensively. Totally. And what a strange testament to the change and shift of basketball to think that he's actually the same height and weight as Dwight Howard. But he handles the ball like that. That's just such a stunning revelation to me to be like, oh, basketball has changed so much now that guy, that build is like just beating dudes off the dribble like that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yes. Well, I do have to say real quick, Luke, when Stephen said, hey, do you want to get Luke on? We could talk about some different things and all. I jumped at the chance because I was like, this is a guy that I really want to talk to. I like the feel that we have in the groups and you haven't disappointed. So I'm definitely glad to continue this friendship, relationship and stuff. Sure. So I'm excited even more about this is where I thrive, man. Like talking, because I just had to step away from like really posting about Magic on Twitter a lot. But this is where I can just like sit with people who love the team as well, and just like I can, the three of us could talk about Magic underwater, Magic basketball underwater.
Oh, totally,
you know what I mean? And I just wanted to say quickly to you guys, Stephen. Obviously, I've been listening to what you've done for years, and we've developed a friendship through it. But I think this shift now with the two of you has just made it like it's really enhanced everything you wanted to do with it, Stephen. So kudos to both of you. And yeah, I think it's awesome that you've come on board, Malik.
Thank you.
It's wide open, y'all. Hop on.
Yeah, anytime.
Appreciate it, man. Well, listeners, this is gonna wrap it up for the episode today. I appreciate you tuning into the Close Up Magic. Make sure you give Luke Smith a follow on Twitter, even though he's not going to post about it. Luke, go ahead.
I'll comment. It's Smithy4701, Smithy4701. And if you bring good content, I'll still comment on your stuff. I'll just never tweet out stuff.
Yeah. And Luke occasionally will jump in an article from time to time on the Close Up Magic every now and then. So all that being said, Luke, thanks for joining us. Malik, appreciate it as always. Listeners, thank you for tuning in for this week's episode. Please, again, like and subscribe if you can, and you'll hear us next week. Have a great night. Go Magic. Peace.
Thank you, guys.